Today, we are exploring a game that dared to boldly blend genres, Actraiser. Developed by Quintet and published by Enix, Actraiser pushed the boundaries of what video games could be. It wasn't just a game, it was a statement. At a time when most titles focused on refining a single gameplay style, Actraiser delivered a groundbreaking hybrid of action platforming and god simulation elements. This unusual mix created a truly one-of-a-kind experience that helped cement the Super Nintendo as a console for innovation. While many Super Nintendo titles like Super Mario World and The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past were celebrated for perfecting established genres, Actraiser carved its own niche. It wasn't afraid to take risks, presenting players with a fusion of gameplay styles that demanded strategy, reflexes, and creative thinking. This willingness to innovate was both a strength and a hurdle. Its ambitious design won over critics, but confused some gamers expecting a more traditional experience. The game's unique approach earned it critical acclaim, and it developed a cult following that persists to this day. Despite its status as a classic, Actraiser's innovative formula proved difficult to replicate in sequels or spiritual successors, making it stand as a singular achievement in gaming history. The story of Actraiser unfolds in a world engulfed by chaos, where the balance between good and evil has been shattered. You assume the role of the Master, a godlike entity who once ruled over a prosperous land filled with thriving human civilizations. But after a fierce battle with the malevolent demon Tanzra, you are gravely wounded and forced to retreat to the skybound Sky Palace. While you recover, Tanzra and his 6 lieutenants, each representing a deadly sin, spread their influence, corrupting the land and its people. The once flourishing world descends into ruin, leaving you with a divine mission: to reclaim the lands from Tanzra's grip and restore hope to humanity. This mythological setting draws heavily from a mix of Judeo-Christian themes and classical mythology, though it avoids overt religious references by referring to you simply as the Master. Tanzra is a stand-in for Satan, while your role as the supreme being recalls elements of divine intervention from stories like the Book of Genesis or Greek myths about gods shaping the mortal world. The story unfolds in 2 distinct phases: the action platforming segments and the simulation sections. In the former, you descend to Earth in the form of a mighty warrior statue, wielding a sword imbued with divine power. These sections depict your direct intervention, as you battle monsters and vanquish Tanzra's minions. The stakes are clear: defeat these demonic forces so the land can begin to heal. Once the immediate threats are quelled, the game shifts to the simulation segments, where you guide humanity as they rebuild their lives. These moments give depth to the story, showing the long-term impact of your actions. As you drive off monsters and shape the land to make it habitable, humans begin to thrive, but their struggles don't end there. Your followers face challenges like droughts, plagues, and even moral dilemmas, requiring you to offer divine assistance to overcome them. This interplay between the divine and mortal realms reinforces the game's central theme of a god not only as a warrior but also as a nurturer. Actraiser's execution of its story was ahead of its time. It combined action and introspection in a way few games dared to attempt, leaving a lasting impression on players who witnessed the rise and fall of a god's influence over a troubled world. The gameplay of Actraiser is where its true innovation shines. Divided into 2 distinct modes: action platforming and city-building simulation, Actraiser offered players an experience unlike anything else in 1990. This bold fusion of genres not only set it apart from other games on the Super Nintendo, but also created a dynamic interplay between fast-paced action and thoughtful strategy that kept players hooked. Despite its ambitious design, this duality wasn't without its flaws, but it's hard to deny the game's ingenuity. The first gameplay mode puts you in control of the Master, inhabiting a warrior statue brought to life. In these sections, Actraiser delivers a more traditional side-scrolling platformer experience. Armed with a sword and divine powers, you navigate detailed 2D environments filled with enemies, traps, and environmental hazards. The controls are simple, yet effective. Your warrior can slash, jump, and cast powerful magic that devastates enemies in a pinch. Magic plays a key role, offering flashy and effective attacks that feel appropriately godlike, such as firestorms and lightning bolts. However, its use is limited, adding a layer of strategy to when and where you unleash your divine wrath. While the platforming is solid, it's not perfect. Some players found the movement a bit stiff compared to smoother contemporaries like Super Mario World. The challenge level is fair, but can spike during certain boss fights or tightly packed enemy encounters, where precise timing becomes essential. Despite these minor frustrations, the action segments succeed in delivering the adrenaline rush of cleansing a tainted land with sheer divine might. Once the action portion of a region is complete, Actraiser shifts gears into its second mode, city-building simulation. Here, the game trades fast reflexes for careful planning and strategic thinking. You guide humanity's reconstruction efforts, overseeing the development of towns, clearing away obstacles like forests and rocks, and defending your people from persistent monster attacks. This mode feels more like a god game in the vein of SimCity, and its inclusion added a level of depth rarely seen in console games of the era. The city-building segments aren't just about managing resources, they're also about solving the unique problems of each region. One area may suffer from a drought, requiring you to call forth rain, while another may face plagues or even internal strife that tests your role as a benevolent deity. These challenges add narrative weight to the gameplay, making you feel directly responsible for the well-being of your people. However, this mode also has its shortcomings. The mechanics are fairly simplistic even for the time, and can become repetitive as the game progresses. Once you've mastered the basic formula, clear monster layers, build houses, and expand, it can feel like going through the motions. What makes Actraiser's gameplay truly remarkable is how these two modes feed into each other. The action platforming sequences set the stage by purging evil from the land, allowing the simulation mode to unfold as you restore civilization. Conversely, the city-building segments provide context and stakes for the action levels, making the fight against Tanzra feel purposeful rather than arbitrary. It's a rare example of a game where two drastically different genres work in harmony, and that's a big part of why Actraiser remains so memorable. For an early Super Nintendo title, Actraiser made a stunning first impression with its audiovisual presentation. The game demonstrated the power of the Super Nintendo hardware, pushing the boundaries of what was possible in the early 16-bit era. From its detailed sprite work to its legendary soundtrack, Actraiser created an immersive atmosphere that elevated the experience far beyond what its gameplay alone could achieve. Visually, Actraiser stands as a testament to the artistry of pixel graphics in the early 1990s. Each region in the game is crafted with a unique aesthetic that reflects its setting and theme. The character sprites are another highlight. Your warrior avatar is a towering, heavily armored figure with fluid animations that convey strength and divinity. Enemies and bosses, meanwhile, are grotesque and intimidating, often filling the screen with their sheer size. The bosses in particular are impressively detailed, from the skeletal dragon of Bloodpool to the winged chimera in Atos. However, some graphical elements, such as the human townsfolk in the simulation mode, are noticeably less detailed. These simpler sprites don't detract from the overall experience, but they stand in contrast to the rich environments of the action segments. The city-building interface is functional but minimalist, which may feel underwhelming compared to the grandeur of the platforming sections. If there's one aspect of Actraiser that consistently earns universal acclaim, it's the music. Composed by the legendary Yuzo Koshiro, the soundtrack blends orchestral and choral elements with sweeping melodies, creating a sense of divine majesty rarely matched in video game music. Koshiro's work on Actraiser is often hailed as one of the best SNES soundtracks of all time, and it's easy to see why. Each track perfectly complements the gameplay and narrative. What makes the soundtrack particularly impressive is its orchestral feel, which was groundbreaking for a cartridge-based game. Utilizing the SNES's advanced sound chip, Koshiro created layered compositions that felt larger than life. Tracks like Fillmore and Birth of the People are so iconic that they remain fan favorites decades later, often performed by orchestras at video game music concerts. The combination of Actraiser's lush graphics and unforgettable music made it a sensory delight that stood out even among the SNES's strong library. The presentation wasn't just a technical showcase, it was integral to the game's ability to immerse players in its mythological world. The epic scale of the visuals and sound made you feel like a god reclaiming a fallen world, reinforcing the game's themes and narrative in a way that gameplay alone couldn't achieve. Actraiser may not have spawned a sprawling franchise, but its influence and reputation have cemented it as one of the most innovative titles of the 16-bit era. Released during the infancy of the Super Nintendo, Actraiser's genre-defying design, ambitious presentation, and mythological narrative resonated with players and critics alike. Its legacy is one of bold experimentation, setting a high bar for creativity in gaming, and leaving a lasting impression on the industry, despite its flaws and a rocky sequel. When Actraiser hit shelves in 1990, it received widespread praise for its groundbreaking fusion of action platforming and city-building simulation. Critics marveled at its ability to balance two seemingly disparate genres, creating a cohesive experience that kept players engaged. Players were equally captivated by the game's presentation. The stunning visuals and Yuzo Koshiro's masterful soundtrack added an epic layer of immersion that was unmatched at the time. These elements helped elevate Actraiser above its peers, making it a standout title. The success of Actraiser naturally led to a sequel, Actraiser 2, released in 1993. Unfortunately, this follow-up abandoned the hybrid gameplay formula that made the original so beloved. Instead, it focused solely on the action platforming elements, removing the city-building simulation entirely. While the game retained its high-quality visuals and challenging combat, fans were disappointed by the loss of the simulation segments, which had been integral to the original's identity. Despite its short-lived series, Actraiser's influence can be seen in numerous games that followed. Its ambitious genre blending paved the way for titles that sought to combine gameplay styles in creative ways. Games like Dark Cloud, Terranigma, and even Black and White echoed Actraiser's themes of creation, destruction, and divine intervention, demonstrating the enduring appeal of its core ideas. For years, fans clamored for a modern revival of Actraiser, and their prayers were finally answered in 2021 with the release of Actraiser Renaissance, a remastered version of the original game. Renaissance updated the visuals with a mix of 2D and 3D elements, added new story content, and expanded the gameplay mechanics, particularly in the simulation mode. While the remake received mixed reviews due to its art style and pacing, it rekindled interest in the franchise and introduced Actraiser to a new generation of gamers. Though its star has faded somewhat over the years, Actraiser remains a touchstone for innovation, inspiring countless developers and holding a special place in the hearts of those who played it. Whether you experienced it in 1990 or discovered it decades later, the game's unique blend of action, strategy, and mythological storytelling ensures its place as a classic that continues to resonate.